tuning in to another of our beautiful earrings kits how-to videos. In today's video, I'm going to show you step-by-step how to build the Sonora Chevrons earrings. And here's what the kit looks like when you get it. You have all the beads you need, the findings, and some thread. And it is a, I would say, somewhere in between intermediate and beginner, more toward the intermediate side, but still approachable if you're newish to bead weaving in the brick stitch style. So to get started, you just want to cut about a little under 60 inches of thread. So 55 inches or so of thread will be plenty, and that'll give you lots of extra for weaving in and finishing the design. All right, and the next step you want to do is go ahead and get the needle of your choice, a size 11 beading needle is what I have here, and string on the needle and fold over a comfortable length that will make the working length a little shorter, easier to manage. And this design is going to be worked from the midpoint. So the pattern that I'm showing here is downloadable from the link in the description. And the midpoint for us is going to be this section right here. So the middle row and the row above it. Now all these rows are actually the same width, so usually in a brick stitch design you'd work from the widest row and then choose a row above or below and work that one. This one here, we're working it with just the middle so that we have the ease of not having to add thread or work with a really long strand, because you can work from the middle up with 1/2 of the thread and leave about half the length as a tail, and use that tail thread to work the bottom. So what we're going to do first is lay out the beads on a beading mat in order A, B, and C. A being red, B being gray, and C being the really pretty off-white color that we have here. So just lay those out onto your beading mat, and then when you have that ready to go, we'll get started. All right, so here are the colors laid out in order, A, B, and C. And I'm going to go ahead and just push this a little bit off to the side so you can get a very good visual of what I'm working. And again, I'm going to be working the middle row and the row above it, leaving about half the length of thread that I cut behind as a tail. So to start, this is what's called single column peyote stitch. And so it's worked by stringing the first 3 beads in your pattern. And so that's going to be for us 3A, going back through the first bead that was strung. And then you pick up the next bead in the pattern and go through the second bead that was strung. And then you keep going by picking up the next bead in the pattern, going through the former bead. So let me show you what that looks like. We're going to get 3A beads. And again, slide that down to about the midpoint of your thread. And then go back through the first A bead, which is this one right here. And to keep the spot in your thread where you identified the midpoint, you can just pinch the thread in your fingers like I'm doing here, pull your strand through, and then just stop right there. Take the working side, the tail side, and just pull those apart. And what you'll get is the first little pop of peyote stitch right there. So that's what we're going for. Hold that tight by kind of winding the tail thread around your fingers. Select this little section we made and hold it so that just that bead that is the one sticking up. So it's the second one we strung. It's right here. The one that's sticking up. We're going to go through that bead in this direction with a new bead. So again, I'm just holding it in place so that it doesn't get loose on me. The next bead in our pattern is another A. Going through that bead, and you'll get single column peyote stitch. So this is the method that we'll use to create the rest of the row. And let's just do that together here. It's a nice short row. We're going to need to add 4 color B. So each one by itself, there's 1. And again, I'm just holding it in my fingers to keep everything tight. And there's 2. 3. It's going to tighten that right there. Here's what we have so far. Here's number 4. There you go. So the next thing the pattern says to do is to add 4C. So there's 1, and 2, 3, and 4. All right. So there's the first 2 rows basically already done for you. And in the handout, there's an extra little tip that I've included that I recommend doing because it makes the next steps easier. But the single column peyote row we just created, if you want to stop that from getting loose, go ahead and do what's called like a weave around. It's like reinforcing the edges and also getting your thread in the direction you'd like it to be heading for your next step. So in the case of where we are now here with the working side and the tail side, I'm going to go ahead and weave around to get my thread heading this way. And then I can use that strand to work that part of the pattern. And then I'm going to take the tail thread, put a needle on it, and weave it around so it's heading this way, getting ready for later when we work the bottom half. So how that looks on the piece. Here's starting on the working side, just because that's where I've got my needle now. I'm going to go up through the adjacent bead. And then after going through the adjacent bead, which is that color A, go up through the color B bead, because you're going to need to make a turn to get to the edge bead. So through there, and then down through the next one there. And then go ahead and make that turn, go right up through those. And after you've made that turn, just take a quick look at it. If the thread hides when you pull tightly, that's great. If it doesn't, you can spin them in between your fingers, like that. And sometimes that helps the thread settle. So I'm going to grab one more needle really quick. This is my tail thread. And I'm going to go ahead and thread a needle and do the same thing on that side. Bringing that through. Here's our tail side. Going back through the adjacent bead here. And then through the, what's essentially the third bead in on that row. Down through the adjacent bead here. And then up through the one we want to be exiting from. So that did 2 really nice things for us. That strengthened this row for us, so it's ready to go. And it also put all the threads exiting from the bead where we want to be to do the next step. So the next steps in the design are steps that we're going to repeat over and over. It's basically a 2-step process. So every subsequent row, it is a little offset from the one before it. And how that looks on the pattern, if you can see here, we've built these 2 rows. See how each one, it's like a little staircase. So essentially what's going to happen is as you're building each row, depending on the direction you're exiting from and heading to, in our case, this is where we are, you're either going to be doing an increase or a decrease. So for example, starting on this side, we need to do an increase on this side. So you'll bring both beads through the first thread bridge and then add each subsequent bead under each subsequent thread bridge. But when you're here, you need to do a regular decrease. So in brick stitch, when you start each bead at each thread bridge, you get a natural decrease. That's what's shown here. So you'll exit from this bead, string your 2 A beads, and then go into the second thread bridge. And the rest of the row is just until you get here is just 1 bead per thread bridge. But when you get to the end of that row, you need an increase. So you need to add 1 extra bead under the same thread bridge you added the last bead. So let's do that together. And that essentially for this particular pattern is the gist of it. It's worked that way all the way to the top. And then when you bring the tail side back, that is worked the same way. Your tail will be exiting from right there. So you'll start with a decrease and end with an increase. Start with an increase, end with a regular 1 bead to the last thread bridge, for example, and then here again, starting with a decrease, ending with an increase, and so on. So that's how this is built. Really simple. So from here we are, we're going to pick up 2 A beads. And then I'm going to go under the first thread bridge with those. Pull that all the way through. And then come up through the second bead. And let's take a look at what we've got. There's our increase. Next bead we need to add is a color B. These were color C and this is color B, the gray color. Next thread bridge. And being careful not to puncture the thread as you're working, just add that next bead by coming back up through it. Here's another C. Go under the next thread bridge here. And then come up through that bead. And now we need to do 2 color A. And super easy. They're just going to go under each subsequent thread bridge. There we go. So that's how to create one of the rows when you're exiting from what we'll call just the side with the C beads, the white side. When you're exiting from one of those, you're going to do an increase first and then end it with a regular 1 bead per thread bridge. And then when you're doing this next step, which is coming out of an A bead and headed to the right, you're going to pick up 2 color A, and we're going to go under the second thread bridge. So just right under that one, come up through the second bead and pull that tight. And those 2 beads will sit just like that. And mine are lining up pretty nicely. If yours are crooked or kind of catty corner, like sometimes that first bead doesn't sit exactly flat. Sometimes it does. I've never been able to figure out why. It does sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. If yours isn't, it's really easy. Just go back through that bead and keep going. And then just come up through that second bead again. And that's optional if you feel like it needs it. Sometimes, like I was saying, it doesn't. Sometimes it does. And now that's locked in really nicely. Let's keep going. Let's do the next bead, which is a color B. And that goes under the, whatever thread bridge is next, just go right under that. Next color was a color B. So far we're just doing what we know well. We're just picking up a bead and we're going under the thread bridges that are next. Pulling tight. And then just coming back up from underneath that bead and pulling tight. All right, so here's what we've got. We need to do 1 more color C This is a increase, so we're going to have it go under the same thread bridge that we just used for the last bead. It can be hard to see, but if you just go kind of in between the two beads below it, you'll catch that thread bridge. So how that looks is you just kind of get under it by just going in between those two beads. And pull through. And the bead will kind of sit like that. And then all you have left to do is go up through that same bead. And pull tight, take a look at it, make sure everything looks good to you. If you have any thread showing in between the beads, give them a little spin in your hand like that, a little roll. And sometimes that can help everything just kind of line up. There we go. So that's what we're going for. All you really need to do from here is a repeat of the same thing we just did. So far we've got 4 rows complete. So if you just take a quick look back at the pattern, we've got these 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so we just need to repeat what we did 1, 2, 3 more times. So repeating these steps here 3 more times. Let's meet back here once that's done, and I'll show you how to weave in on this side. All right, so I've completed the top half of the pattern, and all I have left to do is go ahead and weave in my working side of my thread. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is go back through the adjacent bead. And go through one below it. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a turn and just come up through those 2 beads again, just to reinforce that corner. And later we're going to be putting a jump ring through that corner bead, so that's just to make it a little stronger. Go through it just one more time. You know, don't reinforce it more than once, because the space in the bead, we need to leave a little space for the jump ring. And so you want that jump ring to fit. So I went ahead and reinforced it once, so that means there's 2 passes going through there. And that should be plenty. So going back down through the adjacent bead again. And from here, I'm just going to weave in. So let's go ahead through the next one. Maybe I'll come up through the gray bead that's next to it. From here on out, you can just go making turns and stitching in whatever direction you feel looks good. And usually what I try to do is get approximately 3 turns. Meaning I went through a bead and then turned and changed direction and went through another bead a few times, right? 2 or 3 times. Also, if you have anything like this happening where there's one where I didn't do the little reinforcement turn at the beginning, and so I think I'm going to weave over there and give that one just a little extra loop through. There we go. So weaving in is a great opportunity also. Not only does it serve a purpose, but it can fix stuff if you wanted to. So there we go, that fixed that little problem I was having there. Go through a few more beads. I'm just going to try to get to, whoop. So you don't want to do that. You want to cross, you'll see thread. Try to just get through them in the diagonal motion there. There we go. Okay. So I kind of take my time with weaving in, especially on one of these where a little strength can't hurt, right? Because these are going to hold their shape when you're wearing them. So that's one side of the pattern all finished. I want to trim my working thread. And so I'm just going to get some scissors really quick and push down and pull up. That's pull up with the thread and push down with the scissors. And we'll get one side all complete. Okay, and so take a look at your pattern and just note that we've finished all of this. If there's any errors, you can always add another increased row down here if you had to, so you can always save it, but just make sure you've got the same numbers. So counting from here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks good. So from here, we're going to start building from our tails exiting from that A bead. So we're going to start with a decrease, building this way, then an increase, building that way with the tail thread. And I still have my needle on the tail thread from when I did my string looping on it. So there's that bead exiting from there. And I'm going to take these 2 A beads and go under the second thread bridge. And there's a great example of when it kind of, the first bead kind of leans in a little bit. So all you got to do is just go back through it. Back up through that second bead. And it should sit really nicely, just like that for you. Let's finish that row. 1 bead at a time now. So now I need to put 1 more color C. So I'm going to go under that same thread bridge just by getting in between those 2 beads. That's what same thing we've been doing on the other side. Pull that through, and then just go ahead up through that same bead. So that's our goal. We're going to do the, let's do 1 more together. Let's do the trip back, which starts with an increase. So you'll need to pick up 2, color C. And then you want to go down under the first thread bridge. And come up with the second bead you added. And so you'll get a little increase there. And from here, you just finish the row 1 bead at a time. So even though this is kind of a, how did I label it, intermediate, but the steps, once you get them, it's just the same thing. And once you figure it out, those increase, decrease, and it's really just the order, keeping that steady order going. So from here, we just have to finish out the rest, and then let's meet back after you get all the way down here, and we'll weave in that side and put our chain on and our charm. All right, so all complete, and I'm going to do the same thing on the side that we did over here to weave in this strand. Just very quickly, I'm going to go back through some beads. And the same thing will be true of this side that was true of the former. That is, we're going to be using that very top edge bead right there as a suspension for some chain. So you're going to need to get a jump ring through it. For that reason, we just want to do 1 reinforcement pass. So I'm just heading that direction right now just to get through it 1 more time. It's just my little weaving around that I just finished up. All right, and so from here, I'll go back through the adjacent bead here, and then from here you can just weave in through any beads that you'd like. And then go ahead and trim it. Okay, I finished weaving around there. Just gonna go ahead and trim that. And we are all set. So from here, you're gonna wanna grab the findings package that came with your earrings kit. That looks like this. And it has tassels, chain, jump rings, and ear wires. And then I'm going to use some chain nose pliers and some bent nose pliers, and I'm going to open up these jump rings. So take a close look at your jump ring and find the seam on it. My seam is right there. I'm going to hold that jump ring in my pliers with the seam side facing up, and then using some bent nose pliers really quick here to open up that jump ring. So the jump ring is just a lateral motion. Just open it just like that. You need to give it a little bit more opening than usual because it's going to go through a bead. And I like to start from either of these corners first, and then try to get your jump ring through the bead really carefully and gently. What I find is that sometimes it goes right through and sometimes it does not. One of the reasons it might not go just instantly through for you is if there is any thread making it get stuck, or if the side of the jump ring you're trying to feed through has any kind of a little burr on it. Sometimes when jump rings are manufactured, they have the process has a little cut, and one side's flush and one might have a tiny little burr. So if you just switch the jump ring side you're trying to feed, that can often help. But the goal is to get it through gently without breaking your bead, and then go ahead and get one end of your chain and put that onto the jump ring as well. And then using my bent nose pliers, I'm going to close that jump ring. All right. So there's one side done. And we'll go ahead and get another jump ring and do the same thing on the other side. Being really deliberate and slow and thoughtful about it. You don't want to break a bead. There we go. And just make sure your jump ring's closed and being really careful. This is where bent nose pliers help a lot. You can get in there and have visibility still around your tool. All right, and so there are our jump rings on that side. I'm going to open one more here. And then I went ahead and put the tassel on, and I'm going to feed that through this bottom point bead here. Let's see, let's switch sides. And try one more time here. Yeah, so there's always going to be a side that goes through a little easier. Not sure why, other than it could just be that the little burr on the jump ring was getting caught there, or it could be that my thread was being snagged by it, a little of both probably. And with this one, The tassel's a little wider, so it might take you a second to get it closed, but just go slow. There we go. It's a little delicate work on these. Okay, so all you have left to do is put on your ear wire, and for that, a couple ways you can do it. I think what I did on the originals was I just put a jump ring to join the chain, and then I put my ear wire on there. You could put both ends of the chain through the ear wire. That would work too. But I'm wondering if it might hang better if we put an extra jump ring. And the kit comes with lots of them, so you'll have plenty of those. All right. So let's just do the chain first. Let's go through one side, go through the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and close that jump ring. It's gonna be easier to do this way. And then I'll just use my chain nose pliers to open up the ear wire, which has a seam facing that direction, usually. And let's put that on the jump ring here. Close that up. There we go. All right, so from start to finish, there is our Sonora Chevrons earring. Be sure to check out our other kits. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.